In this video, we'll discuss the good reading techniques, how to read actively, creatively, and critically. There are all kinds of quotations about the power and importance of reading. For instance, the 33rd President of the U.S., Harry Truman, once said, "Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers." Founder of the Smart Youth Volunteers Foundation, Leila Gifty Akita claimed, "If you wish to renew your mind, read." And Confucius said, "No matter how busy you are, you must find time for reading or surrender yourself to self-chosen ignorance." The list of quotations about the power and importance of reading can go on and on. If you're not convinced, Google importance of reading. See how many hits you get. Perhaps the most interesting of all these quotations comes from a 19th century poet and essayist, Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said there is creative reading as well as creative writing. Even if you are already convinced that reading is an invaluable skill, do you think there is anything creative about reading? That reading can be just as creative as writing? If you don't, you're not alone. Most people think that reading is passive. However, the science of reading, an emerging field in education, tells us something quite different. In addition, researchers and scientists are learning more and more about the ways in which the brain and eyes work together when we read. For example, Joseph Santamaria has found, as our eyes move across the text, our minds gobble up the type's texture, the sum of the positive and negative spaces inside and around letters and words. We don't linger on those spaces and details. Instead, our brains do the heavy lifting of parsing the text and assembling a mental picture of what we're reading. In other words, reading is an active process, an activity, an action. There is nothing passive about reading. Some of us might be surprised by this. When we think about reading, we might conjure up images of a person sitting under a tree, lazily absorbing a book. Or we might think of a person sitting quietly in a room, away from the world. Whatever the image may be, it usually involves someone sitting, and sitting is quite passive. However, when we read, our brains are quite active. To prove this, take a moment and think about your reading process. How do you read? Do you read fast? Slow? Do you read a text more than once? Do you take notes? Do you ask questions? Your answers to these questions might depend on the kind of text you're reading. For instance, if you're reading a grocery list, you probably won't take notes. But if you're studying for a history midterm, you'll probably keep a notebook filled with questions and important bits of information. So how you read depends on what you're reading and why you're reading. And you already know how to approach a text, determining the best way to make meaning out of it from your years of reading experience. Since this class is an English composition course, we'll be reading and writing about difficult texts that will require us to read actively, creatively, and critically. How can we do this? Here are some good reading techniques to encourage you to become an active, creative, and critical reader. You may be familiar with some of these techniques, or you may be discovering these techniques for the first time. Whatever the case may be, all of these techniques will be critical to your reading experience in this course. Good reading techniques. First, slow down when reading. Reread. Annotate. Annotation involves underlining, circling, highlighting passages you think are important. You can use sticky notes for this. In the margins, note why these points strike you. These notations are called marginalia. Again, you can use sticky notes instead of writing directly on the text, which can be hard to do when reading a text online. More good reading techniques. Ask questions of the text. Talk back to the text. Look for unusual features of the language, heightened awareness of style. Look for patterns of images, repeated words or phrases, and any other unusual stylistic features of grammar and punctuation. Keep notes and questions short and to the point. Consider keeping a separate notebook for your reading in this course. Asking questions of the text. Asking questions of the text may seem like a new reading strategy for you, but when you read a difficult or complex text, you're actually participating in a conversation started by the writer. And while you participate in this conversation, you're constantly asking yourself questions. These questions fall into 4 categories. The first category is questions about the text. These questions focus on genre, structure, language, style, expectations, connections to other texts, powerful images, and motivations. The second category is questions about author. An author's age, gender, race, beliefs, family structure have an impact on his or her writing. So sometimes it's appropriate to ask questions about an author to come to a better understanding of a piece. Distinguishing between narrative voice and writer is easy with fiction, not so much with poetry because poetry has the reputation of coming from the heart. The third category is questions about cultural context. Writers don't write in a vacuum. They're creatures of a particular time and place. Some questions you can ask are, what was happening historically when the piece was written? Wars, other forms of social disruption, standard of living, day-to-day life, power relations, work expectations, educational possibilities, family structure, gender roles and expectations. Also, your own cultural context affects your reading and understanding of a text. The fourth category is questions about the reader. Who are the work's original intended readers? Were they the readers who read the piece when it was first published? How did the original readers react? Was the work popular, or did only certain readers enjoy it? Was there any controversy over the work? Harsh critics? Also, we can compare our reactions as 21st century readers with a 21st century perspective with the reaction of the intended audience. While reading the text this semester, consider using some or all of these good reading techniques. Also consider using techniques that are not mentioned in this video. Perhaps where you read is just as important to you as how you read, so picking the perfect location is crucial to your act of reading. Not only will these techniques serve as the tools you'll need to better understand the text, they'll also be the tools you'll need to think critically in all aspects of your life. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.